Overwatch 2's worst tank might actually be usable again, and it's all thanks to a simple rework. Hey, welcome to the channel, and today we're talking about everyone's favourite DPS in a tank's overcoat, Roadhog. Roadhog has always been a bit of a pariah among the Overwatch tanks. From Hook 1.0 back all the way in 2016 to his brand new rework that he's just received in Overwatch 2, he's seen a substantial amount of changes over the years and has progressed from being a one-man army that was a little too easy to counter into something that's a bit more self-sustainable and more reliable overall. The problem with Hog is that the devs have never quite worked out how to balance him properly. So we thought we'd go through a quick recap of the more meaningful changes that he's seen across the years, all the way up to now, and the rework that could be about to change everything for the better. 2016 was the year where Roadhog would seemingly transcend time and space with his hook, dragging people from what felt like Ilios to Hollywood with relative ease, all before guaranteeing their demise with his primary fire. If you played the game while he was in this state, well, we're surprised you're still here. It took several months of balance changes to his hook before it was finally tamed, with February 2017 being the end to Hook 1.0's reign of terror. The ability saw 6 overall balance changes to bring it into a state that was actually fair. Fast forward to November 2018 though, and Roadhog would be a shell of his former self. Consistency issues across his kit were making him struggle to have an impact in games, and changes were made to address that. His hook was tweaked to greatly reduce the momentum of the target that he was pulling being hooked, meaning heroes like Tracer and Lucio wouldn't move sideways from where they were pulled thanks to their lingering movement speed, and would instead be held in place, allowing for Hog to finish his hook combo more reliably. His scrap gun randomization was also reduced by 50% for both his primary and secondary fire, so when combined with the hook changes with this patch, the consistency issues were pretty much already addressed, and made him into a bit more of a functional tank again. And so finally, we arrive at the sequel, and Hog's position in Overwatch 2. Dramatic changes across the board to every role were on the menu as 5v5 drastically changed the way Overwatch as we know it played, and that was no different for Hog. The beta buffed Roadhog's overall health as with other tanks from 600 to 700, and increased the amount of healing from his Take a Breather up from 300 to 350. The more daunting change came to his ultimate, where it was changed from a channeled ultimate like Cassidy's and Pharah's into a transform ultimate like Genji's. Stuns would no longer take him out of his whole Hog, and he gained the ability to use his regular abilities while casting it, which meant you could heal and hook while knocking people back. And this is where we get to the point where Overwatch 2's devs really had a go at helping Hog and just failed entirely. In January 2023, he had his primary fire get a sweep of changes. The recovery time was reduced, the reload time was reduced, his ammo count was increased, and the following 3 patches would increase the duration of his ultimate, reduce the cooldown of his chain hook, but none of it really did anything to move the needle on Hog in Overwatch 2. If you didn't believe in my point before, surely all this just proves that Hog really is one of the most difficult heroes to balance in Overwatch, at least as his ability kit stood. It became increasingly clear that only a proper rework would help this Hog get back in the saddle and start to be able to really compete with his fellow tanks. And that is exactly what we've got, in a manner of speaking anyway. A new ability and some decent changes to how his current kit works might see a new wave of Hog meta sweep through Overwatch 2. But will it? Let's break it down. His scrap gun has lost its secondary fire functionality. Write it off. Instead, the primary fire will now also fire a shrapnel volley of 4 large projectiles in the centre of a shot. Each shrapnel projectile deals 15 damage, and each shotgun pellet will deal 6.25 damage, up from 6. The overall pellet count of his primary fire has gone down from 25 to 16, but thanks to the addition of the shrapnel, the total damage per shot has actually gone up from 150 to 160. The critical damage multiplier of the scrap gun has gone down from 2 to 1.5, all relatively fair changes given what's coming up. It's Take a Breather that's seen probably the most dramatic tweaks. It's now activated by holding down secondary fire, and will now be managed from a resource meter, similar to D.Va's defense matrix, rather than a single one-off bout of mass healing. The meter will deplete while the ability is being used, and will recharge when not in use, just like any other resource. Those familiar with Moira's healing or Pharah's flight will feel right at home here. And Take a Breather will now remain active as long as its assigned hotkey is held. The cooldown for each use of Take a Breather has been decreased from 8 seconds to 1 second, courtesy of it now being a resource that Hog players will have to actively keep track of, and at full charge it'll heal up to 450 health over 3 seconds. Taking around 12 seconds to reach full charge from being empty. The damage reduction from Take a Breather has been decreased from 50% to 30% as well, which does somewhat hamper his actual natural tankiness, though the ability to heal on demand should account for that. And finally, we have his new ability, Pigpen. That's right, there's no need to worry, his hook is completely unchanged. Pigpen is bound to the ability 2 slot by default, and it launches a trap that slows down and damages nearby enemies. It's basically an AoE slow effect that'll allow Hog to take control of corners and certain choke points more easily. Or you could just drop it in the middle of a fight and let chaos take the wheel. For Lorehounds, it also makes particular sense, aligning a piece of his kit with Junkrat's, only it functions a little differently. The Pigpen deals 60 damage on being triggered and will deal 30 damage per second in a 3.8 meter radius around it. It lasts for 3 seconds and once activated will slow down enemy movement speed by 40%, and it has a 12-second cooldown. Oh yeah, you thought crowd control was back before, now it's back. So where do all these changes leave Hog? There's no doubt Hog looks in decent nick from the rework. Gaining the ability to control the amount of self-sustain he receives and triggering it as a resource is a massive boost to his survivability, and since it's on a 1-second cooldown, an Orisa Spear or an Asleep or some other form of interrupt is way less detrimental to him than it used to be. He has some newfound crowd control that will make him way more of a pain to deal with and give him way more utility outside of hook and go bang with scrap gun. Hook an out of position enemy into your crowd control. Trap more people in your crowd control with Pigpen and go ham on them with your ult or your scrap gun while feathering your self-sustain. Sounds like a recipe for a decent tank in Overwatch 2, if you ask me. The truth is, Hog was one of the real losers from Overwatch's switch to 5v5, and he's been comfortably one of the game's worst tanks pretty much since launch. There's a reason this rework has been in the workshop for as long as it has. With the rework going live as of today with plenty of other changes, Hog becomes not just functional, but potentially actually viable as a tank depending on where the meta shifts. It makes Hog work how he should. No longer is it rip a hook and hope to one-shot and go from there. Roadhog is an actual Overwatch 2 tank, and this rework will have players respect him as such. All that said and done, what do you make of the changes? Do you think Hog can finally be considered a proper usable tank in Overwatch 2? Or are we going to see him stay firmly planted to the bottom of the barrel? And while you're here, if you want to see more Overwatch stuff like this, check out these videos here.